obvious, Gen AI has taken the world by storm. But a lot of us think a lot more happening in AI, even outside the world of Gen AI. And so we wanted to dedicate today's thing to hear from people what their experiences have been when they are working on things which are not Gen AI related, right? So Mark is ex-Meta product leader. He is now building his own company called Exceeds.ai. Chris is the founder for Overview.ai, which is once again not Gen AI, a lot of computer vision. He will talk about that. Jay is a very senior product and design leader, and he's driving a bunch of self-driving cars and EVs, etc. at Ford now. And he's also ex-Amazon, Microsoft, Google. And after that, I'll give you a little bit of intro about myself. So Mark, do you want to start?
Sure, yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Mark Hall. I founded a company earlier this year called Exceeds.ai. What we do is actually in the performance management space. So we work with teams to basically analyze their work data. So the data exhaust that comes from tools like Jira or GitHub or things we're doing there. We analyze those tools mixed with the HR data to make predictions about performance inside a company. So basically killing the performance management process and having always on sense of actually how people are doing. So all of you who have been through the PSC process or know what I'm talking about, you can understand where the name comes from and probably have a little PTSD from that experience as well. But it's really about building people insights, and so we'll be doing some NLP and some other things that are beyond just generative use cases on that. But the experiences that may also be more relevant for this discussion, well, I have nothing to do with cars or vision detection, things like that. At GoodRx, my previous company, was the chief product officer there. We were doing a lot of machine learning and reinforcement learning for price predictions to help people get the best possible discounts on their drugs and also manage margin with retailers. Facebook, I led the sharing and production team there, so whenever you created content in news feed, stories, or reels, that was my team there, and everyone's interfaces were all different thanks to ranking, relevance, machine learning as well as part of that. And even back at LinkedIn, we were doing NLP, 7-10 years ago, if you can believe that, with our messaging product.
I'm Chris, founder of Overview.ai. So it's a tool for manufacturing. I used to work at Tesla. I was in manufacturing and started a company in 2019 building an AI tool. Even then, computer vision was getting very good, so you could start to do applications that were challenging before, and built a tool that we have software on a camera. That camera goes into a factory and can be trained pretty quickly to spot defects in things that are kind of being made over and over again. And so it's definitely AI. It's not Gen AI. It's kind of a slightly older version, and then it's embedded on the device, so it's not linked to the cloud. It's kind of a different style than the stuff that's like kind of the most buzzy right now, but it's a deep application of AI. The application requires very accurate detection, and having the software on the device is a nice security feature for factories. So there's sort of a lot of reasons why we chose to use the type of AI we did, and that ends up making it kind of different from the stuff that's kind of the most popular right now. But we were able to kind of figure that out, and it's made our product work really well. So I could get into that if it makes sense.
Hi, I'm Jay. I work on digital product design for Ford right now. So mainly my background is design. If I go back, I'll give you a story. With Windows Phone, I worked on Windows Phone, and that's, of course, iPhone had come out first. But we remember, like, everyone was using BlackBerry keyboards, and iPhone keyboard wasn't very good the first couple of years. I worked with an AI scientist, Microsoft scientist, and we designed the first, I want to call it AI, it's predictive keyboard. And the way it worked was, at the time the screens weren't that big. It's before those 7-inch screens. And we would learn customers' habit. And we had a predictive engine so that when you typed a letter, we would know what character, probability, you would hit next. So we made the tap size bigger, which is novel at the time. And it did way better than iPhone I still have problem typing on iPhone today. So that was my first entry into working with someone and designing an interaction model that was intelligent and helpful and useful. At Amazon, we worked on Echo Show and multimodal kind of experience. There are many things going on there. There was, can you make conversation natural? I think what got in the way was, the technology at the time, you had to translate it into text, pull it to the cloud, turn it back into voice. And it's basically a slot machine, very transactional experience. So the vision was to be a lot more fluid which was not possible. Now with the LLMs, I think the input can be much more natural. So I think that's kind of exciting. So I'm just kind of skimming through stuff at Google. I was at Workspace. So a lot of I think we were a little bit shy on how much we turn on, how you narrate for customers. And so we're holding back quite a bit. I think they've ripped their band-aids now. They're going all in. But the doc was called the Smart Canvas. And so some of the things we worked on was if you hit add, you can get a lot more components to add calendar, map, files, and they're objects that are smart, essentially. They're not just links. So it makes you be more productive. Those are the little simple detail things that we work on to make things smarter and more useful for customers. And the thing with cars, I'm not supposed to call them cars, I'm supposed to call them vehicles. I think that it's a hard and really exciting space because there's so much regulation and safety criticality is important, and you have to do things in real time. All of those things matter, especially for autonomous driving. But I think there's this idea of what we call third space. As you start defining a software-defined vehicle that's intelligent, people want to have the cabin space to be your third space. And you're seeing a lot of that happen in China already. Mm-hmm. And so we think about, different modalities, while you're going somewhere, when you're stationary, or when you're doing some activities around the vehicle, cars. And so those are all the opportunities we have to orchestrate really interesting experiences.
Cool. Yeah, a little bit about myself. I am founder and CEO for Chisel. I started this company 4 years ago, and we shipped our product in the market almost 3 years ago. It's a bunch of you have asked me what Chisel is. So Chisel essentially is a product management platform. You may have heard of other platforms like, for example, Product Board or AHA. We are basically, to cut to the chase, we have two unique differentiations, right? One is we are very automation focused. So you can say things like, for these two user stories, create a PRD, and we will use Gen AI and create PRD based on your own data. You can say things like, hey, June release just finished, so create a status report for the June release. And we will go through every feature or work item in your workspace and automatically include that in the status report. So we do a lot of automation to free up your time. That's one of our big differentiators. The second is that we are a discovery and roadmap platform in one. We are a two in one. A lot of the roadmap platforms are one-trick ponies. They essentially only do roadmap. Whereas we start right from the customer discovery. So you don't need to spend on two systems. And within our system, if you click on any roadmap item, it gives you traceability all the way back to why are you building it? What's the customer feedback that's backing that? So that's what we do for Chisel. Before that, I started another company which I sold. It was in natural language processing. It was way before OpenAI. We did a lot of stuff there which was not Gen AI. It was predictive in nature, like predicting churn or anomaly detection kind of work. Before that, I was in a related company like Mark, you were talking about HR. I was at Humu as a head of product. Humu was a machine learning based company for HR scenarios. And before that, long ago, I was at Microsoft, did a bunch of things. I was head of product in Office 365. Before that, I built the Windows App Store, which eventually became what is today in the App Store. And early days, I used to work on the high definition playback for Xbox when I joined Microsoft. So I think to kind of jump in and to extend the conversation, I think my main question is that each of us are working in an area where the AI application is very different than a typical Gen AI application, right? So I think my one and probably the only interesting question from my side is to ask you guys that in your area, if you compare that with what we are hearing with the typical Gen AI story, right? What is different? What is unique? What is challenging? What is more fun? Like anything that you think stands apart in contrast to Gen AI, that would be really awesome for everyone to hear.
So my current company obviously does a little bit more of Gen AI than the previous experiences I have. And obviously at GoodRx, a lot of reinforcement learning and machine learning, and same thing with Facebook as well. I think that the thing that's obvious about Gen AI and why everyone is so drawn to it is just how easy it is, but it's deceptively easy, right? It's very difficult to get the right kind of signal, the high quality output out of it, despite how easy it is. Now, I love the fact that it's easy because it's accessible. Right? So many people can actually begin to play with this, and it sparks all sorts of new ideas, which as product leaders is so key, right? Ultimately, we have to be building things that solve real problems and meet real needs. We're in this novelty phase where, honestly, I question a lot of the things that are out there, especially Gen AI related, to are they really solving a real problem? If we go back to the areas outside of typical Gen AI, again, just whether it's NLP, Edge AI, and you can put whatever buzzwords that are out there, the intersection of these things together gets to become really powerful. If you can get more precise predictions, ranking, and relevance to influence a personalized experience, and then feed that through Gen AI, that's tremendously powerful. I'll make this more concrete. So when we were at Facebook, we were tuning things all the time, right? Trying to predict what will be the thing that leads somebody to comment, to post, to do whatever. And so the process of doing so took forever. You have armies of people that are working on it, but it would take weeks, months to generate a new model, to test it out, to validate it works, to make sure it's not biased, and then to ramp it up and then to see the consequences of that. Well, you don't have to do that to that same degree anymore, right? And so the idea that you can have the same kind of impact with the tools that are available today are really exciting. But if you don't understand the data fundamentals, how data comes in the pipeline, the way that you need to structure it, have it organized, it's easy to use those Gen AI tools in a more dangerous kind of way. So a bit of a ramble, but gives me some perspective.
I was going to say, a lot of companies, especially in the last year, are sort of like, oh, Gen AI, it's amazing, it's new, like there's got to be some good uses for it. And our company kind of started that way with computer vision of the 2017 to 18 era. But it actually, starting that way, took us a little while to get a good product. And then finally, we figured out what our product should be, what the customer really wants, how they use it. I mean, this is all kind of cliche stuff. But by doing that, then we kind of figured out, well, which AI works the best for this product. And potentially down the road, some of the newer models that are kind of in the Gen AI bucket could be like a leapfrog of what we sell now. But if you tried to do it now with Gen AI, it really wouldn't work that well. And so by kind of really understanding the product, focusing on what we needed to really do at the application, then we found which part of AI is the best solution for this. And it didn't happen to be Gen AI. Probably a better way to create a new thing is figure out what is the thing you really want to do, and then what's the best tech for it, rather than, there's new tech and let me figure out what I can do with that new tech.
100%.
So Chris, for overview, if you could go just a tiny bit in detail, you guys are using cameras,
Yeah.
which are proprietary to kind of watch the manufacturing floor, and then you are basically doing defect detection, right?
Yeah, we sell a camera that has a GPU on it, so it's embedded all there. And then there is an AI algorithm on there, but there's a workflow. So a manufacturing engineer buys the camera, plugs it into their computer, follows 5 or 6 steps, takes some pictures of their parts, labels them, but it's all kind of DIY, so that they're doing it. They don't need to understand AI really, they just need to kind of follow these prompts. Then they, after getting a handful of data, they click train, and the computer trains itself, and after that it can start to make the predictions. And then we're also giving kind of feedback on it. Do we think this is going well? How's the confidence? And it's really like getting the non-AI generalist engineer to build a good, accurate algorithm by themselves. That's where there's not really another product that can do that, and that's where the real value of our thing is. The AI itself, a grad student, somebody could come up with that, but getting it so that it's not that much input data and it's really easy and accessible, and then it's in the form that an engineer who works in a factory wants. Somebody who's AI first would have a lot of trouble getting right.
I think the properties of Gen AI is interesting because you can be more natural in how you do the inputs, and you're starting to see more multimodal experiences. So the big challenge is, for anything physical, and it'd be interesting to talk to you about it, is LLM is very digital. So when you're dealing with physical and digital, it's a very different problem space. But the interface, you want to be as natural as possible. Sometimes writing's okay, but I don't know, I was never a good writer, so I don't like writing a big prompt, right, to get accurate results. So I play with different models to see if I can get in a conversation. It's slow, but I like it better than me having to write 3 accurate paragraphs for it to give me what I want. Like, it's just kind of an interesting pattern I see there. But like if you're driving 65 miles an hour, you're covering like 30, 40 yards a second, you don't want to be specifically prompting. That's not what humans are good at. So you need to use your eyes, mouth, whatever, to input your intent, and you want the vehicle to understand you. It could be hot, it could be cold, you don't feel whatever the case is, right? So I think that's the interesting part. The way I think about it is this, like, okay, if you have an input that can be more natural, when do you want a deterministic answer and when do you want a probabilistic answer? And I'm trying to use the language of computers. You would think that obviously you just want deterministic answer. That's not true. But that's the hard part. If I'm going on a road trip and go, take me to Lake Tahoe. I don't know, it's a weekend, depending on your situation. Do I want you to take you to a different route? And it's not just about like traffic jams and most accurate route, but what's the most experiential route for you? Like that's a creative way to get you there without you having to be deterministic. But safety, like you don't want to mess with it, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to go down the wrong road. You don't want to going down a road that potentially, this gets actually harder because we have vehicles that go off-road and people like adventure. So the risk profile of a person is different. So in the future, the question is like, do you want your friend to do things for you and to what extent? Or do you always need the permission of a human?
Yeah.
There's so many instances here, especially when you're driving, where this comes up a lot if you kind of play that. Anyway, so that's up there.
Yeah, I think, like, in my experience, one of the things that I've seen, which is quite kind of different, the way I think of AI is that, like in my own product today, Chisel, right, there are both applications. We use Gen AI and we also use other AI. For Gen AI, I can just put a prompt saying, write me a spec for sign up. And ChatGPT will hallucinate 3 pages on sign up, right? Because whatever it knows, it will just throw the sign up spec. So yeah, I mean, Gen AI can do a lot. I mean, we don't like that. We basically feed the data in your own workspace so it becomes super accurate and relevant. But nonetheless, that's a very different model. On the other side of our product, we have this feature which we call Chisel AI Assistant, which kind of like, draws your attention to things which are critical and you don't want to miss. Like a feature date slipped and it has dependency on 2 other features. Now that can create havoc, and as a PM, you need to be on top of it. So we bring it to your attention. But to train that model, right, is very different because it's not like we're just passing something to Gen AI or some LLM. We have to have enough data. We have to have a model behind that to say that, yeah, this is actual. And that data is not easy to come. And so for those kind of things which are, anomaly detections or those kind of things which are predictive, it's really the data that kind of makes all the difference. And a lot of Gen AI scenarios kind of make it reduce the emphasis on that. That data really is the king. Without data, you're not really going to get a high quality output. And for whatever reason, ChatGPT makes it seem like data is irrelevant because ChatGPT has a lot of data. And so you can ask open-ended questions like, hey, write me a spec for like sign up, and it will hallucinate all day long. Actually, very interestingly, in our audience, we have Trevor. He is the partner in Correlation Ventures, and they are one of our investors in Chisel. But when we were talking just before the event, he reminded me that Correlation has, like, their investment is made using AI models. And so I think, I want to actually, take a just quick break here and have Trevor share his experience of building, like, non-Gen AI product, because they are actually using that to make investments.
So our approach is to use an AI model for venture decision making. The objective was, first of all, to make objective, unemotional decisions, and also to make them fast. And I had been a venture-backed founder myself, and the first institutional round raising $3 million, we have a lead for 2. That last $1 million was a nightmare, right? Because people wanted to repeat weeks of due diligence, renegotiate the terms, ask for a board seat, own a certain percent of the company. They weren't flexible, right? So we said, listen, could we build a co-investor that would use AI? So I want to be clear, AI is not appropriate for obviating the lead investor, right? So we followed Bluepoint and Contour here, right? With Chisel, right? So smart people, Sandeep is here, right? And also Matt Gorman from Contour did the classic due diligence. They assessed whether Praful is going to go the distance. So they have the right motivations. what's the competitive landscape in terms of these other products and how they compare with what Chisel's doing, right? So we're not saying you can obviate that.
Right.
The lead has to be there to make the subjective due diligence work. However, why does check 2, 3, 4 new and around need to do the same thing, right? And waste the team's time with months or weeks, and also add unnecessary people to the board, right? That's disruptive. So for new check 2 through N, perhaps you could use someone like us, right? So that's what we've done. We built a AI decisioning model and the factors, and they fall into 3 broad buckets, right? Factors about the company, the round, and the investors. Right. So again, think of it as supplementing when you have a lead, or let's say at least an outside VC who's making bet 1 in the company, they're betting their career. Do you want to go through another 2 months of work, or add people that are disruptive to the company, right? And then I should say we have our own value-add story, where we're focused really on 4 areas that we believe are complementary to the lead. So can't just provide cash; we also provide help. But also, first we do no harm. Right, the Hippocratic Oath. But anyway, great to see so many of our portfolio partners here today.
And just a quick follow-up question. You guys build your own models, right? For the decision engine
Correct.
that you have?
And we built our own data set. So we bought the commercially available data sets. We brought our own data sets from our own prior venture funds with the permission of our partners, of course. We've done knowledge partnerships with a number of large VCs.
Right.
One of whom I met with today because we did benchmarking for his fundraising in return for his pure outcomes data.
Yeah.
And we called thousands of companies to see who has a business, who was out of business. So what we've been able to do is determine that our data set is representative of the industry.
Right.
Of course, there's going to be missingness, but can you build a data set that doesn't have a systematic bias? That was key.
Yeah.
And I guess our philosophy, I'll speak for Anu Pathria, our analytics partner. 2 ways to differentiate yourself in a data science strategy. Do you build better algorithms, or do you have proprietary data? Right? We think the algorithm piece probably will be harder to defend. So one of the strategies we've done is build the most complete data set of venture outcomes data and protect that. Right? So, but both are viable strategies. We don't know yet which will win in the long run, but we think we can defend that better today.
Thank you. Makes sense. To your point of deterministic versus not, it matters that if a car is self-driving, I reach home in one piece. Or for instance, if you're doing manufacturing, detect defects, and it matters that you actually detect the defect, right? Because otherwise it can have big consequences. So when you think about these kind of situations where there is life or death or big consequences involved, what has changed, like in your day-to-day work, or in how you talk to your customers or your users, right? What has changed? What do you need to do differently or more vigorously that you haven't seen outside otherwise?
What's changed since just kind of like relative to what, I guess?
Relatively, for example, someone like, let's say me, building a Gen AI product, which is just, I'm calling OpenAI, let's say, right? And the risk is not like somebody's not going to actually, if ChatGPT gives an answer, it's not going to be.
I'll give you an example. So again, there's different levels of autonomy. We're doing L2, which you still need. You can be hands-free, but your eyes has to be on the road.
Yeah.
So there's an IR camera that looks at you, whether you even have sunglasses on. And so it'll warn you. And then there are times when you have to keep your hands on the wheel, just to make sure the vehicle feels more confident by its steering. So we use the data to go, oh, why are customers bailing out of that L2 autonomous mode? And turns out often it's lane changing because there's cars coming. California, like you feel like you've got your lane, but then it disappears. It's like what? But we have usage data to get that information. So then we added lane changing, auto lane changing, based on how the vehicles are approaching from the adjacent, usually on ramps, and that keeps the customer not churning out and staying in Bluecruise longer. And so, but you have to design an interface and give that appropriate information to them. So that's one way we're handling. It's safety critical. People get nervous, they bail out, but they like the experience, so how can we improve on that experience? We use the usage data to help prototype it and run that through and see actions, and it's getting more stickier. So, and I'm sure Waymo has way more examples like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the requirement of high accuracy and the kind of specifics of the use case for why we haven't shifted to Gen AI and why we've used the older generation models that we have and make people label some data and do stuff that isn't quite as easy as ChatGPT or something, but it then yields the results you kind of need to make the product really valuable.
Right. And when you go to the customers, right? I'm sure they would have some bar, right? They would like these kind of questions you would always get that no, it has to be like 100%, you can't do 99% detection.
Yeah, I mean, we have a pretty sophisticated buyer, so they're either like kind of wary that it's going to work at all because they're familiar with like older versions of AI products that didn't work that well, or they aren't like they're not that sophisticated and they expect it to be like kind of too futuristic because they've like heard about ChatGPT doing crazy things. So we do have to kind of qualify the people we end up selling to, and we don't really want to sell to somebody who's expecting it to be like too good or too easy or something, because then they get disappointed or whatever. But people that are kind of in this field, have used some of these tools in the past, they have like they're usually kind of ready for it, and we can explain it in a way that makes sense, basically.
I'd say that maybe drawn the experience I had at GoodRx where we were doing dynamic pricing using reinforcement learning and machine learning at the same time. The key thing for us were, there are three parts because we're working with retailers in the ecosystem who are very concerned about their margins, patients who talk about life and death situations here, this is exactly it, right?
Yeah.
Wrong drug, wrong quantity, wrong access could be disastrous. And so what we had to do also at the companies, because it's not a technology company, there's a lot of, not to denigrate the professional management consultants in there that don't have that appreciation for the technology. So there's that battle back and forth. So the three things that we really had to do is one is to make sure that everyone was aligned and being very transparent with what we were going to do. And that meant the retailer partners, it meant like even our customer safety people and the executive team. The second thing was to be very clear about how we're actually going to approach it and what our tolerance range was. So is it 100% or 0, or can you have a 99% range and you can test it and be wrong within that window? And third was to actually just be very transparent about how the data is being used and not used, so that people are understanding like here's how it's actually coming to these recommendations and the penalties that the machine, if you will incur when it gets it wrong. When we did all that, and then you did the classic slow ramp as part of it, it actually worked out really well because people saw what the upside was. When there was a downside case, it was able to self-correct right away. And then the executive team felt like, okay, we have control of what the visibility is to the business outcomes as well as the retailer ecosystem. But we couldn't have done that with, again, Gen AI practices or other components that were part of it. You had to go to those other parts of AI in order to make that a safe bet going forward, given the consequences.
Cool.
I had a question for Chris. So you said with your process, you have the person who works there who doesn't know anything about AI has to go through these setup processes. How do you ensure the quality in that? I mean, you're putting trust that this person's going to answer the prompts or whatever they are correctly. Is there something afterwards that there's some sort of test you run so you can test the accuracy? Because obviously human error or misunderstanding can make a huge difference on how your performance is.
Yeah, we try to display a fair amount of the model's judgment. So if it's making a judgment of good or bad, how confident is it, and like what parts of the image is it focused on. But we kind of just explain that to people, and then they come up with whatever tests they do. But manufacturing folks are kind of rigorous with their testing, so they might not put it into their factory line until they've proven it can spot 100 out of 100 parts accurately, and they'll use parts that they didn't put in their training set. So we kind of like help them figure out how to get comfortable with it, and then in the tool itself, while they're building up the algorithm, try to just give them as much info as possible. It's not like truly hands-off, like you couldn't just hand it to somebody who didn't have any context, but it's a lot easier than other options kind of for people that don't really have this product, basically.
Is there any sort of test that you quality check that
Well,
you can do at the end? Really, because you don't have a go at the start.
I mean, we'll kind of like benchmark our own product. If we're gonna like update the model or something, we have a kind of range of use cases that we try it on and make sure it's actually performing better than the kind of older version. But for a customer who's bought it and they're using it, every use case is a little different. So there's not like exactly some way, but we kind of give suggestions. They usually have they usually kind of have a plan for how they're going to test that it's working. If they keep failing that plan, keep failing that test, then they'll be coming to us kind of saying, this thing isn't working the way it's supposed to. Then we might have to troubleshoot with them and figure out, like they probably went wrong somewhere in the training process or something. And at that point, I don't know, we're working with them to figure that out.
Two questions actually. One is you federate the information across same customer or multiple customers, and then how do you deal with model drift?
We don't really do any federating. A customer can kind of gather data from multiple cameras and we make it easy for them to then use that in a training set and then put it back out. But there's still kind of like the product, the user engineer is in the loop on that kind of stuff. It does usually, some use cases, it will be like 10 cameras looking at like a sheet, and it is useful to get all the data, but it's not kind of automatic. It's just something that we explain how to do. Model drift, I mean, it's a contained enough use case that we don't really see it in the way that I think it's like talked about. A user can check, they can look at all the judgments they've ever made. The camera stores up to like 300,000 images on the camera, and you can sift through those in a way that clusters them. And so we kind of give people some exposure into the data and the history of the judgments and to kind of give them confidence. But generally, I don't know, I don't think we have model drift because we're also not retraining based on the results. If you're gonna retrain it, you have to do it yourself. So it hasn't really been a problem for us.
If you think about the product management as a function, a lot of the things that PMs do, for example, consolidating customer feedback, market research in terms of what's happening, assessment overall for where the world's going. GenAI is great at a lot of those tasks. So arguably, to create a PRD or to create a product roadmap, do you think we are moving to a world where we have fewer product managers, or do we think that there's just so much more innovation which is going to happen that you actually need more product managers to imagine what's possible? That's sort of part one. And then part two is, what does it mean for a company like Chisel, which is building product managers?
I have always believed, this is one of the reasons why I created Chisel, that PMs, because our work touches so many different disciplines, a lot of people end up being middlemen, right? Just going from one place to other and then just kind of like bringing the stakeholders together. I think I call a lot of this busy work. Trying to compile status from all the information that already exists is busy work. A lot of this could be kind of automated. So I think that, to your point, Munish, I think the goal is that if you take all this busy work and shrink it, you make it easy for PMs to do that, then they can actually do their day job, which in my mind is to not really be the go-between person and create status reports. It is actually thinking about, how will I increase the customer adoption? How will I increase revenue for the company? How will I move the needle, right? So I don't think that having a product like Chisel necessarily goes in the direction of you saying, okay, you reduce your PM headcount by half.
I think one question I have is do we think it will learn enough to create, like you said, know the problems humans have, and have product ideas that solves it better than humans? It's just a question. Then we're in an interesting world, because a lot of you folks are founders. You don't need a lot of people. You just need a friend, and maybe that's all you need. And then everything's downstream as a way of working. But it's just a question mark on is that an end state we want to be? And I think once we get over the productivity part.
Yes, I know. That's where I don't think we are close to that state. where you replace a product manager's judgment or a product manager's intuition, right?
You gotta use all that GPU somewhere though. Right? You can't be, hey, here's a new cat, on the water with like another dog. Like what is this? Like we gotta make use of this thing.
Yeah,
And soon enough, all of this can get directed.
We will get better at that, right?
Products.
Of course, we'll get better at that. Models will get better at that. But I don't think that this human judgment and creativity or thinking outside the box or a hustle, right? Whatever you want to call it, that's not going to get replaced with something. So yes, PMs are not going anywhere, right? The nature of the work is what we want to change. We want to free their time to do what they really aspire to do versus what they are required to do in their job, or where somebody's like, boxing them in, hey, I need Sarah's report by Monday morning.
But there's probably like a glass half full, glass half empty version of this answer too. Like, the role of product management should change, right? Like all the toil parts of the job will hopefully get a lot better. And if you haven't listened to Lenny's podcast with Kevin Ian, who's a product exec at Stripe, they talk about this exact thing. And to your point, like the discoveries that a machine probably wouldn't infer from this. But the glass half empty answer would be, not every organization wants product people to do that role in terms of being the more aspirational leader. God forbid that be the case. But think about like the other kinds of product management roles out there, especially the growth optimization. Well, growth optimization is perfectly tuned for a lot of automation as part of that. So ideally, the role will change. The companies that really value what PMs can bring to the table and that intuition, they'll interested to see who those rise as that evolution takes place.
Can I quickly add a business perspective to this line of thought? I happen to have a fairly large team, and one of my biggest issues today is my team's productivity, right? And it all centers on the fact that despite having enough PMs, I wish I could have more, but despite having enough PMs for now, the amount of work they have to do in order to keep things moving forward takes such a toll on their time that we hire them for thinking, what kind of problems we should be solving, while they're spending 90% of their time in solving those problems that they probably shouldn't be solving to begin with. So this shift is extremely important for me as a business leader, and this is where I'm excited about the potential for not just Gen AI, but like a collection of these AI things that can help us put our money in areas where we can get more productivity and reduce our time to market.
Yeah.
Because that's really what it's all about at the end of the day.
Yeah, you had a question, Andy.
Yeah, it was for Chris, and then I have another question just in general,
Yeah.
where do you guys think the future is? So Chris, you mentioned that there's a lot of focus on accuracy, which for a lot of different products, that's the number one criteria. You cannot go wrong with what the final result is. So do you guys see yourselves experimenting, or have you been experimenting with Gen AI, or is there a space for Gen AI in?
Yeah, for our product, Gen AI could probably make it so that you, instead of having to use like 4 or 5 examples, it's really more like 10 to 20 examples. You can maybe use like 1 or 2 examples, and then as long as you could maintain the accuracy, then it would be kind of a better product. So we do test that a little bit, but that's to get the Gen AI kind of model to be as accurate as the thing we have now. It's a lot of it's a lot of effort, and we have a small team, and so like we kind of decided not to like put our energy into doing that just to make it a little easier to use. At some point we may do that, but yeah, I think we could probably get a Gen AI style model to be accurate enough, but we would have to kind of like wrangle the model into our use case in a way that we decided kind of isn't really worth it.
Yeah, and the second question was on the conversation we were just having. So if you look around and look at all the companies coming up, you just kind of said right now AI PM, right? Like there would be a scenario wherein a PM would get a support like in terms of productivity through this AI PM that you said. So I'm hearing AI TPMs, I'm hearing AI engineers, I'm hearing AI HR,
prompt engineers.
so there is literally for every function there is an AI component to it.
Yeah, there's AI assistant for every
Absolutely.
function.
And in some areas, in terms of creativity, if you use it right, it's better, right? It gives you a lot, it just takes away all the redundant work that you do on a daily basis. So from your perspective, you guys probably have been into this field a lot more. Where do you see, I don't see this far out, like it's not like 5 years or 10 years or 15 years. The number of people required to do a certain function is definitely going to reduce, in my opinion. I just wanted to kind of get a take from you guys. Like, so if let's say if I had a team of like 10 PMs currently, how would that be impacted in, let's say, next 3 years or 5 years? How would you suggest?
In terms of what they should do differently, or what their makeup will look like?
Absolutely. So back to what you were saying, absolutely there's going to be a point wherein everybody wants people to be more strategic in terms of like, if I take product management as a field, than kind of doing the redundant work, sure. But in general, like just from a cost perspective, it looks like all the companies are kind of focused towards how can they substitute AI with the amount of people they have. It also brings efficiency for sure,
Yeah.
but when you see that transition happening, because I'm rapidly kind of seeing it more and more.
Well, I don't know if this is a direct answer to your question, so but I'll just try to warm things up for these guys too. And
Thanks.
listen, like the changes are happening so fast. What was our life like a year ago? It's dramatically different, and our profession is dramatically different as a result, and it's going to continue to be dramatically different. I think the idea that this lets you scale in new ways is pretty exciting, primarily because I think it allows for invention at scale at a pace we've never seen before. Maybe not in a variety of different ways, from like, I personally care a lot about the enterprise. I think there's a lot of amazing things that are going to be unlocked as part of this. On the complete other end of it, my son's a screenwriter, and you can talk about he's been freaked out about his future, but the idea that he can run 10 different versions of his screenplay in a matter of minutes, and like being able to get market research at the same time about the viability of that is phenomenal and scary at the same time. So I think the last thing I would leave on this is that, like, as product leaders, again, for us to be super open to the possibilities, to be very flexible and understanding of that, because our job is going to be dramatically different, I think, pretty rapidly, but then to use it as an opportunity to go invent. And don't invent a bunch of like crappy screenplay ideas, but like allows you to go explore things that you would never be able to do without a huge runway, and that day is over. So, or coming to a quick end. So that for me is really exciting about what the future of PM looks like.
Yeah, I was going to say it's kind of a similar thing, but it's like, talk about like the writers. If you're like a really creative writer, you can write something kind of new, and you probably aren't really threatened that much by ChatGPT, but if you're writing something kind of generic, then that's getting like super replaced. With coding, if you are like a good coder and you can kind of use the tools really well, you can all of a sudden code maybe like the way 5 coders could in the, I don't know, 3 or 4 in the past. So the ones who are like really good at the tools and kind of creative and good are fine, and the ones who are kind of generic and like not as, I don't know, not as like part of the high value part are not as good. And so maybe the same thing is in product. If you've got a 60-person product team, the people that are really kind of the driving things, figuring out what everyone is doing are going to be okay. And then the people that are either kind of coming up like from the beginning of their, or doing something in product that's a little more rote, then that's going to be, not as safe. So yeah, you'd probably have better sense for like where those breakdowns are, but that pattern seems to be kind of consistent.
To add, I'll do a bit of a provocation and get to me, there's a bit of a choice that everyone has to make. So let's try this. We all learned from COVID, what did we learn? We can work remotely, right? So I started in Google and worked there for 2 years on a screen. Okay, everyone was a 16:9 box. That's what I remembered. And it was like another channel. Could have been Netflix, but it was, work. So move forward. I think we've seen enough generation of humans on a screen. It's my choice. I could create a workforce. You could just be all virtual. It could be multi-agent. Then who's the boss? I don't know. Does it matter? It might not. I could even be trading that to another company that is all agent. So that's a choice we can make. And so there's that side. I have a daughter who's also creative. She went to film and TV and went through the strike, and we had huge debates about this stuff. I'm a designer as well, so it's not that I don't mind AI, What I do mind is, right now, everything is about, if you go to any conference, even on design about AI, is how fast you can get things done, right? We're trying to microwave our way through everything. That's not what humans are about. Humans are about slowing things down. That's when humanity shows up. So think about that for a second. I worked on Microsoft Calendar, and I remember looking at one Windows Phone. You guys know what agenda view is? What is agenda view? It's actually a lifeless view. It's your work. We're going to be so efficient. We're not going to even show you your free time. That's what agenda view is, right? So what's the problem with that? That's not human. So what I mean by that is, what I enjoy the most as a designer or as a creative person, and I think humans all have this, creativity, is that blank canvas. Don't be afraid of it. Dwell in it. Like every good company I went to, we're trying to crack a hard problem. There's no formula. You have to go through the Dyke alleyway. That was like something Jeff Bezos used to say a lot. For big problems you have to solve. You don't want AI to solve that for you, but it is a choice you have to make. Because I think it will. It will be able to. So that's kind of the provocation I have.
Yeah, I think a lot of good points here, right? My thing again boils down to a very simple thing, right? We hear customers asking for a lot of these things. When they ask us that, hey, can you create a status report? We say, yeah, we can do that because it's deterministic, right? We have all the data, we can really automate that. There is no intuition or judgment or synthesis needed. Then they would say, if we say something like, sign up, can you create a user story for that? Yeah, that's easy. Yeah, given something like sign up, we can create 3 user stories for you automatically. You don't have to even do that work. All good so far. Can you automatically create a roadmap for us? And I'm like, wow. I'm miles away from there because to create a roadmap, essentially what you're saying is now you have 100 user stories in front of you. Somebody needs to synthesize this and have a point of view that out of this 100, only these 6 are important ones given where I am, given where the company is, given where the market is. And tomorrow, if you ask me, that 6 will be different. That number, that changes every day. So that synthesis I don't see, like AI taking that away from someone saying, okay, all these are 100, all 100 are valid, very well written user stories. All of them are customer asks, but we are only going to pick 6 of them. That's all we can do in this month. And which 6 is it going to be? That synthesis I don't see. We are very close to replacing that human judgment or intuition or synthesis, as I call it, as a PM synthesis.
But you can bet someone's going to try.
Yeah. See, I think what's happening is today, people will try, right, and they will show you something, but then will it stand the scrutiny? Like, who will say that, yeah, these are the 6 I would have picked otherwise, right? Cool. So anyone in the audience have, go ahead, any other?
Well, this is a question, I mean, if there's still time, this is
Yeah.
a question for Jay, really. In my mind, there seems to be a friction point that prevents users from taking full advantage of the AI capabilities that's even available today. And I'm asking you the question because you work in automotive and you have experience in automotive. For example, in cabin comfort, for example, there's so many AI voice control that customers can take advantage of, but we don't. We would much rather have a tactile function for climate control rather than putting your hand on a flat screen on a Tesla to try to micro move these airflows, right?
Terrible.
Yeah. It's a terrible experience. But if you think about, hey, maybe the car can understand exactly the type of temperature that I want, and then it can always be set that way, but people don't function that way. So from your perspective, what do you think is that friction point that prevents users from really reaching into that AI world?
So I'll be quick on this one. We think of the vehicle experience having kind of 3 intersections. When you can seamlessly integrate the vehicle capability with occupants' intent and their devices, and with the world around them in the context, then we think there's some magical experience we can create. It's a hard thing to do. Climate's a great example. You would think it's easy. Like, I've studied climate more than I want to, but like some are required, like, you know, max defrost. Who knew? Max AC is used by more people who drive trucks during the summer times. And so the question is like, okay, can you bury them? Can we be smart about them? What's for surface? You know, so the car industry started with like 56 of these buttons. You push them into a touch interface. Only a quarter of them can make the first surface. So it's a huge problem for customers. So you go, why not auto? Like, why can't we just be smart? You know, and the trick of the smart is, you would think that. I'll give you an example. Heated seats. There are 6 options. 3 for cooled seats, 3 for heated seats. Which one should you pick? Oh, Jay, it's summer, it's hot. Of course it's cool. What if you have a backache and you know you like your seat to be warm? This happens quite often actually with cars. People love sitting in the car seat, full blast heat, even if it's summer, because they have back problems. So like, there's a point where the intent is not as clear, whether it's explicit or implicit. So those are the challenges we have, solving very small user problems. Same with auto. You know, like if you look at the difference between auto and max AC is auto tries to bring this temperature up at a certain degree with the fan speed that it thinks is right, but it's too noisy. So what happens to most people? They drive, it's hot, you drive, I can't hear my freaking, you know, music, or someone call me, you go manual right away. And then all of a sudden, dialing a fan, dialing the temperature, moving the vents, or oh my gosh, I gotta do this, right? So those are just those are the real problems that we're trying to solve, that we hope could be magical. We're not there yet. Yeah.
So continuing on the car thing, I mean, do you think it's an age thing also? Like, I never use any of the auto functions, right?
To which?
Is that I never use any of the auto functions.
Yeah.
Is it an age thing? Because, you know,
Yes.
I have everything manual control. Like, I can't even find the start button in a Tesla. Maybe there is.
Yeah, I mean, it is.
Oh, there you go. Now I'm wondering if I find it.
Not only that, I mean, auto industry is regulated, right? So there's a Japanese word called Kaizen, which means continuous improvement. So problem with that, the goodness of that is you're trying to get high quality, but it also is the biggest innovation killer. Because guess what people are gonna do? They don't want to do anything different or new. We just shipped a Nautilus that has a wide screen, a 48-inch, and it sits much farther away from your eye, and it's what we call eyes up and out. So normally your down angle is what we call it, from the road to the steering wheel. It's about 30 to 40 degrees, and you're looking through the cluster through the steering wheel, and it's about 30 to 40 millimeters focal length. So your transition is quite significant. And if you're eating up, 30, 40 yards every 1.5 seconds, that can be detrimental if you don't do the right thing. So ours is eyes up, so 12-degree downward angle, very comfortable, 100 millimeters away from your position. So your glanceability and your transition is way better. And so we can actually put more information and people feel more comfortable, for example. But we get complaints, and 80% of the complaints come from people of 65 and older. It doesn't mean we can't ignore them, right? But like, the challenge becomes then like, oh, they come to me and go, Jay, we want to warn you because we got this survey that says, you're the worst performing vehicle. And I go, I actually say, I don't really care. Because we're trying to build a center of excellence. We're trying to get to the leading indicator, not the lagging, number one. And we have data and we solve them with software. So anything that we say is difficult to use, we try to solve that. Like climate's an example of it, touch interface, right? You over-index without buttons, of course, it's not gonna work. And we wanna modify that and make sure we have better interface for that. So, it's sort of a, but innovation was, so you go look at the peer group, zero innovation. It's Kaizen City, right? Okay, you can win your awards, but you're not going anywhere. So you have to choose. it's a balancing act.
We talked a lot about AI and how exciting it is, and I think we all see the future. What do you all see as the biggest risk or downside that you're really concerned about when it comes to AI as you think ahead?
So, having worked at a place during a heat of some pretty intense things about integrity and just seeing the consequences of that, this obviously triggers a lot of things for me. I'm actually surprised that the AI routes, knock on whatever, has not gone as dark a path yet, but I also think it's early. I don't mean the specific election, that is early still, but just in general. So what I fear is just the abuse cases that are inevitably coming. And you're seeing echoes of that aren't strong quite yet, but there'll be things that we've never imagined before. The obvious ones around image and deepfakes and all that stuff, those are really clearly going to happen to a greater extent. I don't know how you really get your arms around some of that. So for me, it's a pretty easy answer on that one, but it'll be interesting to see what the effect is on society in terms of how it reacts and how it trusts or distrusts, because that will be the cascading effect on everybody here. This deep thing, AI is bad. You're doing AI, it's bad. Like that correlation that people will be making is, I actually think, could be the big industry killer for everything.
Within my company, it's almost like opposite, where it's like there's so much hype about AI, there's like a lot of expectations, and then like the engineers cost a ton, and the tools are expensive. I mean, it's like everything is sort of like amped up because it seems like it's so powerful and it could do all these like revolutionary things, but then when you're kind of like pragmatically trying to figure something out, it's like not as great as it sounds, but that actually kind of creates a drag sort of on everything you're trying to do. So there's, in the kind of narrow sense that's a bit of a problem.
As much as we lean on the convenience of technology, my concern is AI can make us kind of lazy. And then what happens then, especially, when you have younger kids and they're growing up and let alone phone and social media, now you've got this thing that isn't that productive, but it's gonna take another, chunk of your life out, right?
Yes.
And it's not clear to me how that's good yet.
Yeah, I think for me, in the more immediate future, right? Not talking about Skynet and Terminator. I think in the kind of more immediate future, I think the two things that I keep thinking about is one is see, AI will produce, the quality of output will be a function of how good the data is, right? To train input data, essentially. And I think that, so my one concern is essentially, when garbage in, garbage out happens, people still think, oh, it's AI, so it must be right. Or, sometimes you have this tendency of taking it at its face value without knowing that, hey, it was garbage data, and so it's just producing garbage output, right? So that's my one concern. The second concern, again, in the more immediate future, is the explainability. That even if you gave it the right data and it picked an answer for you, or if it made a decision for you, how do we know that's the right decision, or that is the amongst all decisions, that was the better decision to make, right? That explainability is still ways out there, and so I think until we have this transparency on what was the input and how did you arrive at this, right? There is a chance that a lot of us will overestimate AI. We may actually give it more benefit of doubt than it deserves, and there may be inaccuracies over there. And I think in some cases it can actually result in pretty damning outcomes, right? Like when it comes to public health, when it comes to security and safety, those kind of things, these mistakes could be very, very costly.
Yeah.
If there's a machine or if there's a bot that could create stuff for you, is it a creativity killer for upcoming generations?
I think it could be a powerful tool.
Yeah.
My insight is right now, because it's to me like the limitation of technology. You have to do as fluid it is to talk to it. To get the back and forth is transactional, right? You have to do the calculation and come back. It's not fluid. To create a canvas where you're literally in a context window for much longer with lots of multimodal input-output, I mean, that's gonna burn the GPUs, but that, then you can have some creativity, right? But that is not how this is designed. It's very much it's a session-based transactional thing, which isn't very fluid at the end of the day. Yeah. But I think if you unlock that and somehow figure out the bandwidth, it could be a very powerful tool for any industry, but it's not how it's modeled, or it's not the infrastructure. It's pretty costly probably to do that.
Yeah.